24/7, I'm Elizabeth Cook. We are watching the podium at the White House where a press briefing is expected to start any moment now. This all happening in the middle of a legal battle over deportations and one day ahead of President Trump's call with Vladimir Putin. Plus, a deadly storm outbreak leaves behind a trail of destruction in multiple states. We're live in Missouri, where communities are reeling over nearly a dozen tornadoes. And EarthCam giving us a live look at Dublin, Ireland, the heart of St. Patrick's Day celebrations. We'll show you how people here are home at home are going green. There, I said it. All right, let's go back to the White House now. Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt is expected to step up to the podium any moment now to give an update and answer important questions from the media. So let's bring in CBS News White House reporter Aaron Navarro. He joins us now from outside the White House. Aaron, great to see you. That briefing expected to start within the hour. What are we going to be watching for?
Liz, good to be with you. That briefing comes days after President Trump announced that the Alien Enemies Act would be used. And since then, the White House has been ensnared in a legal battle of sorts over its flight of Venezuelan gang, allegedly migrants to El Salvador. A judge in Washington, D.C. Put a pause on that. So we're looking to hear from the White House on the timing of these flights, hear more details on how they found roughly over 130 Venezuelan gang members that were on that flight. We're also expecting to hear more, potentially previewing President Trump's call with Russian President Vladimir Putin. Last night, President Trump spoke to reporters on Air Force One, talked a little bit about what they would talk about tomorrow, such as the, quote, division of land, looking to see if there are any concessions to Russia in these talks.
And Aaron, I want to switch over to these presidential pardons. President Trump posted online today claiming that Joe Biden himself did not sign the pardons he issued in connection with the January 6th committee. Trump claimed that those pardons are void and vacant because they were done by autopen. This is interesting because Biden wasn't the only American president to ever use autopen. What do you make of Trump's argument here? The use of online signatures isn't normally controversial. It's done all the time.
Yeah, this came up after a reporter claimed that Biden had used autopen for several of his pardons regarding the January 6th investigation into President Trump. Legally, there's nothing that says that President Trump can revoke the pardons issued by a prior president, President Biden. In this case, and you're right, during his first term, Trump had several hundred pardons, 144 to be exact, 94 commutations. In his second term, he pardoned over 1,600 people who were convicted related to that breach on the Capitol on January 6th. We are out to the White House to see if Trump used autopen or autosign in any of that.
I want to go back to that issue you brought up earlier, Aaron, the battle unfolding after President Trump invoked a wartime act from the 18th century to deport Venezuelan migrants. A judge just accused him of violating a court order blocking those deportations. Have you seen any kind of response from the White House yet?
Yeah, that federal judge in Washington, D.C., it was also announced, has a 5 p.m. hearing on all of that to see if they violated his order. The White House has defended their actions, saying that the flight was already over international waters and not in the jurisdiction of this D.C. federal judge, who did say in court that once these migrants are in the custody of another country, his ruling does not have jurisdiction. We also heard from the White House border czar, Tom Homan, talk about the investigations into these Venezuelan migrants, saying that they were looking into their criminal records and social media. And he also said that there would, quote, be more flights, whether that's related to the Alien Enemies Act that's currently in litigation or other measures that the Trump administration is taking. We're hoping to learn more in this press briefing that's upcoming.
All right, CBS News White House reporter Aaron Navarro. Aaron, always great to see you. Thanks so much for being with us. All right, so lean into this topic of deportations for a moment here. Let's bring in immigration and politics reporter Camila Montoyo-Galvez. Camila, great to see you. You have been covering the legal battle over President Trump invoking this Alien Enemies Act. Can you give us a little bit of background on that wartime law? What kind of power does it give the president?
Well, the Alien Enemies Act of 1798 was enacted by Congress and signed into law just 22 years after the Declaration of Independence, and it has only been invoked a few times in U.S. history, including during the Second World War, when the U.S. government used it at the time to detain and surveil immigrants from Japan, Germany, and Italy. they were classified as enemy aliens during wartime, but this is the first time that this law is invoked during peacetime and against nationals of a country with which the U.S. is not currently at war. Now, President Trump is making the sweeping argument that the transnational criminal gang from Venezuela, Tren de Aragua, is orchestrating and staging an invasion or an incursion into the U.S., and that they should be treated as an enemy state in many respects. And now, anyone who was Venezuelan, who is older than 13, and who was alleged to be a TDA gang member can be summarily arrested, detained, and deported from the country under this wartime authority, or at least that was the case over the weekend, until that federal judge in D.C. blocked the use of this wartime law for the time being. So this is a pretty far-reaching, sweeping authority that, again, has been rarely used by presidents across administrations over the past 2 centuries, and the Trump administration is now trying to use it to fulfill that mass deportation promise.
Yeah, here's where it gets a little complicated, though, because what types of consequences, if any, could come if it's determined that the Trump administration did, in fact, defy the judge's ruling?
Well, federal judges do have the ability and the legal authority to hold the administration in contempt of court, and that is what potentially the ACLU and the other advocates who are suing over this authority could ask the judge to do. We know that there is now a court hearing later this afternoon to go over the concerns that the ACLU has about the government potentially violating this court order. What we do know is that some of the deportation flights that send migrants, including alleged Venezuelan gang members, to El Salvador over the weekend were in the air when this order was issued by the judge in D.C. Now, the Trump administration is arguing that because these deportation flights were in the air and over international waters and not over U.S. airspace, U.S. courts did not have jurisdiction over these flights, and that they could comply with the court order and also simultaneously deport the migrants on the planes that were in the air. But of course, the ACLU would argue that these planes had to turn back and had to come back to the U.S. to comply with that court order.
Yeah, it's interesting to hear what El Salvador had to say about that. In fact, the president of El Salvador had an interesting response to this idea that they violated a court order. Can you go into that a little bit more?
I'm sorry, Liz, can you say that again?
I just was curious what the response has been from El Salvador to this kind of back and forth.
Well, the president of El Salvador, Nayib Bukele, posted on social media saying that this order in Washington, D.C. from a federal judge there came too little too late. He said oopsie on X and said that the government in El Salvador would continue to detain and house criminal and alleged gang members from the U.S. for a fee. Obviously, El Salvador has staged a massive crackdown on alleged gang members in that Central American country, including MS-13 gang members, and that has obviously led to a sharp decrease in crime and homicides, but advocates and human rights groups have said that that has come at a human cost, that that also has trampled on the due process of detainees, and that many of the people swept up in these crackdowns and raids by Salvadoran officials are not actually gang members, but just normal people who may have tattoos, for example, that officials associate with gang membership.
Camila Montoya Galvez, thank you so much for that, sir. Meanwhile, a massive storm across much of the country leaves a path of devastation, really. Dozens are dead, and now there is a new threat, wildfires. We are on the ground in Missouri when we come back. We are following the trail of destruction left by severe weather over the weekend. At least 40 people died across 7 states because of this. Let's take a closer look at the aftermath. This is the damage left behind by just one of multiple reported twisters that ripped through the U.S. over the weekend. This is in Tylertown, Mississippi. Homes completely battered and homeowners just left to sift through the damage in search of what's left of their belongings. And this video to our monitors out of Kensington, Pennsylvania. about a half hour outside of Pittsburgh, where high winds blew that roof off the market. And then someone who lives in the apartment above it there, luckily no one was inside at the time of that destruction. And in Alabama, a storm and tornado that left at least 3 people dead also did this. That's a school bus dangling off the side of a high school rooftop. And in Arkansas, downed power lines and belongings from people's homes just lined the streets there. And in southern Missouri, at least a dozen people have died since Friday. 6 tornadoes touched down in the Ozarks alone. This one that hit this town on your screen there saw wind speeds of up to 140 miles an hour. So let's bring in CBS News correspondent Jason Allen. He joins us live now from Poplar Bluff, Missouri. Jason, what are you seeing there?
Yeah, Liz, this is that tornado that you were just talking about, really the strongest of those tornadoes that hit Missouri that night. And you get a sense of the kind of damage it was doing just by, looking at this house here. The roof is gone. The windows are all blown out. And when you walk down the street here in this neighborhood and it goes down, there's probably, 8 or 10 houses on each side of the road. This one, the roof is ripped off, right? But you can see the whole front is still there. And then if you can swing this camera just down the street a little bit, it's really interesting to me. Here's what stands out here. There's a couple homes that look like they maybe just had a little tree damage, right? But they're still standing, they're still in one piece. And that's what stands out to me on this storm. This may have been really one of the strongest ones that hit, right? But it looks like this was not one of those broad tornadoes. This one was very tight, as you said, up to 140 miles an hour. So not a big, wide path of damage, but in those areas that it did hit, like the homes right here, it really did tremendous damage.
Oh, it's so devastating. Jason, are you talking to locals? What are they doing now that they're returning to their homes?
Yeah, so in a lot of cases, because the damage is so bad, there's not much for them to do except maybe pick up some things, move some stuff out, figure out where to go. Maybe if you want to look at it as a little bit of a silver lining, Liz, I want you to look across the street and you can see that the power lines are up right there on the road already. Those are all brand new. They were up less than 24 hours after the storm. So power is essential in these situations to getting things cleaned up, to getting back to a normal life. We're at about 20,000 people or customers still without power in Missouri, about 12,000 down in Arkansas. But that's a good thing with a storm like this one that's tight in the places where it hit. Power crews can get that energy back onto the grid much faster than they could in some of those broader storms.
That is the first very important piece there. All right, Jason Allen live for us in Missouri. Thank you so much for that. All right, I want to bring in Jessica Birch. Jess, this was so remarkable, not only just the damage that you're seeing from these storms, but how widespread it was. Multiple states were impacted by this.
Yeah, I mean, over 100 tornado reports just across 9 states alone. I will say, though, seeing how fast they were able to get those back up, that's really impressive.
Yeah.
And it's a testament to those communities, too, and what
absolutely.
they deal with every single year. You live in these communities, you're bound to see tornadoes in certain states at some point in your life, right? But to see it become so widespread so quick just this past weekend, and it's uncalled for. Right. And so here's what's happening for us. That same exact storm system that's continuing to move its way offshore this afternoon brings in more rain for us along the Carolinas up into the Northeast as we head into the afternoon and evening hours tonight. On the back end of that, we head into the next couple of days. The storm system you see right behind me, this is going to be the next big weather story for us right around the corner, bringing in heavy rain and snow widespread throughout more states that just dealt with active severe weather. Take a look behind me, too. Another thing to mention, we take a look at the storm reports just from this past weekend alone. I already mentioned it, over 100 tornado reports across 9 states alone. But 2 of those were EF4 tornadoes, and those were in Arkansas. And we continue to keep a close eye on the damage that caused, especially in these communities that we've been watching just throughout the past couple of days deal with either severe hail, rain, thunderstorm activity, and of course, tornado activity too. Now, to add to that, the National Weather Service has been very, very busy issuing flash flood warnings widespread throughout these states. Over 72 reported, and then over 600 severe thunderstorm warnings widespread throughout these states. And as that storm system moved its way offshore, which it still is right now as we head into the afternoon hours today, we can just see how widespread the damage really was. I mean, from Louisiana all the way up into areas like Michigan, we've been watching severe weather become the big trend for us just throughout the weekend, which causes so much of an inconvenience for some, but of course, so much devastation for others. There's been reports of, power loss, like we just mentioned, but deaths happen from this too. So the storm is moving offshore. That's good news. But of course, another one's on its way that's going to bring in more active weather.
Yeah, they're not really getting a break, are they? All right, Jess, thanks so much.
Of course.
All right, the Dow is making gains after a tough week when the index posted its biggest one-week loss since 2023. Traders had a tough time last week adjusting to those quickly changing tariff news. Now, on Sunday, U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said he's not worried about the downturn in markets, but he also said he's not ruling out a recession.
I can predict that we are putting in robust policies that will be durable, and could there be an adjustment? Because I tell you that this massive government spending that we'd had, that if that had kept going, we have to wean our country off of that. And on the other side, we are going to invigorate the private sector. I had a meeting with small bankers last week, and they are ready to start lending. Yeah. And I can tell you that Main Street is going to do well.
All right, let's go to Barron's senior market analysis writer, Paul LaMonica, for a breakdown of all this. Paul, great to see you. I want to focus in on what Bessent just said. Are we seeing any market reaction to his comments there?
Yeah, the stock market is up today. I think investors are, building on the rally from Friday. We had such a big sell-off earlier in the week. The hope is that, yes, the U.S. economy may be losing a little bit of momentum, but, not necessarily too many fears of a major recession just yet. But obviously, tariffs, Liz, remain the big concern that investors are worried about, whether or not we get more from Trump, the reciprocal tariffs, what that's going to do to potentially boost inflation again. Even if it's just a temporary rise in prices, that could be very troubling at a time where consumers appear to be pulling back.
Yeah, leaning into those reciprocal tariffs, Scott, they go into effect on April 2nd. What's that going to look like?
If they go into effect the way Trump says they will, and of course, we've had a lot of negotiation. Things look like they were going to happen, and then there's the deal at the last minute. But these reciprocal tariffs would mean that it's more than just obviously Canada, Mexico, and China. You could have potential tariffs on India, on the European Union, on South Korea that would match some of the tariffs that those nations have on the U.S. And if that happens, you've got the potential for more of a full-blown trade war, or at least a trade skirmish between the U.S. and almost all of its major trade partners, which would be, I think, unsettling to the financial markets and to consumers who are nervous about rising prices. And, retailers like Target and Best Buy have already talked about, the possibility of needing to boost prices depending on what happens with tariffs.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens. A lot can happen in a week, so we could be having a very different conversation next Monday. While I have you here, Paul, I want to ask you about the fast fashion retailer Forever 21. They're filing for bankruptcy again. What can you tell us about that? And kind of looking at a bigger picture here, how are retail stocks doing after this latest market hit?
Yeah, Forever 21, obviously, second bankruptcy, as you mentioned. It looks like the U.S. stores are going to be liquidated through this bankruptcy. The brand name could survive internationally and online, and there's always the potential hope that someone comes in to potentially acquire the U.S. assets, but that remains to be seen. I think, though, that Forever 21 is an example of a retailer that has really been hurt by these fast fashion brands, particularly the Chinese online ones like Shein and Temu. Those are both really, offering a lot of heavily discounted apparel and other merchandise, and that is clearly hurting a lot of U.S.-based companies. Overall, retail, it's a bit of a mixed bag. The retail sales numbers that came out this morning for February were a little bit lower than expected, still growing, but a lot of that had to do with auto sales. If you back out the auto figures, the rest of the retail sector is holding in there, kind of steady, but investors are obviously very nervous. Retail stocks have been hit hard this year. Companies like Target and many others. There are genuine worries about the U.S. consumer getting hit by inflation and now possibly a slowing economy as well. Job market's still healthy, but there are some cracks.
Yeah, it was interesting over the weekend. You saw a lot of these friends and family sales and a lot of these different retailers. It'll be interesting to see if there's going to see more of those types of sales in the future. All right, Barron's senior market analysis writer, Paul LaMonica. Thank you so much, Paul.
Thank you.
Well, it is St. Patrick's Day. New York City is a sea of green today, celebrating the holiday, which started in Ireland all the way back in the 7th century. Take a look at how our partners at CBS News New York are covering what's considered the oldest and the largest parade of its kind in the world.
We're about an hour into the festivities here along 5th Avenue near 51st Street. You're coming to us at a great time. We have coming up, this is the North Babylon Marching Band. So there's been a lot of excitement out here in action. We're right in front of the St. Patrick's Cathedral. This is one of the best vantage points according to the organizers. Now, of course, this is the oldest and largest St. Patrick's Day parade in the world, according to organizers. The first was held back in 1762. So currently right now, we're in its 264th year, and it just keeps getting bigger and better, celebrating St. Patrick, Irish heritage. Now, this kicked off at 11 a.m. near 44th and 5th Ave. Just a sea of green bands, as you can hear, bagpipes now making their way up 5th Avenue to 79th Street, where the parade wraps up. There's set to be 150,000 people taking part in the parade route. Set to be here, we saw Governor Kathy Hochul, Mayor Eric Adams, NYPD's marching band, the Emerald Society. Now, the celebration brings out nearly 2 million spectators every single year. We spoke to a few families that got here early, some coming in from as close as Jersey, others as far as Scotland.
Everything, the excitement, the people, the happiness.
We've been here snowing, raining, all kinds of stuff. Doesn't stop us. We'll come every year.
Yeah,
we love it.
Always fun, no matter. We weather the storm.
We're super excited. Kara flew in from Colorado, so we were like, we're not going to miss it. And like Al's from Scotland. Why is the rain going to stop us? You're not really Irish if you're not going to enjoy if the rain's going to stop you.
Fantastic to be here supporting my Irish kind of compadres. So yeah, just really, really excited. First time and really happy to be here.
And of course, on top of those marching, we have everybody out here lined up, enjoying the parade, wearing their green, having a great time. And of course, the festivities are going to be until 4:30, so you have plenty of time to come out here and be a part of all of the fun. But for now, we're going to send things back to you.
So fun. I have a feeling a lot of Guinness is being consumed in New York City today. Meanwhile, 2 NASA astronauts have spent 9 months waiting for this homecoming, what it will take to get them back to Earth. You're watching CBS News 24/7. Welcome back to CBS News 24/7. To the Middle East now, where U.S. forces launched a series of airstrikes against Yemen over the weekend in a move that could escalate conflict in that region. The target? The Iran-backed Houthi rebels. At least 53 people were killed in the intense strikes, including civilians, and Yemen is vowing to retaliate. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio says the U.S. is ramping up pressure on the Houthis in Yemen to stop its attacks on Israeli ships in the Red Sea and on the U.S. military. Here's what he told Face the Nation's Margaret Brennan on Sunday.
But this is not a message. This is not a one-off. This is an effort to deny them the ability to continue to constrict and control shipping. And it's just not going to happen. We're not going to have these guys, these people with weapons able to tell us where our ships can go, where the ships of all the world can go, by the way. It's not just the U.S. We're doing the world a favor. Yeah. We're doing the entire world a favor by getting rid of these guys and their ability to strike global shipping. That's the mission here, and it will continue until that's carried out. That never happened before. The Biden administration didn't do that. All the Biden administration would do is they would respond to an attack. These guys would launch one rocket, we'd hit the rocket launcher. That's it. This is an effort to take away their ability to control global shipping in that part of the world. That's just not going to happen anymore.
Let's bring in CBS News senior national correspondent Charlie D'Agata. He's at the Pentagon for us. Charlie, great to be with you. Secretary Rubio said the U.S. is doing the world a favor by carrying out these strikes. But what are the risks in this kind of escalation here?
Well, I mean, the United States is certainly doing Israel a favor. Israel has made clear that this threat is to Israeli sovereignty and Israeli territory and the shipping lanes. And when Marco Rubio suggests that it's doing the world a favor, it's to open up those shipping lanes. I think what's interesting about how this has developed over the weekend, because I've been covering this, well, more than a year and a half since the Houthis began these strikes, is it isn't sort of limited targeted airstrikes. What we saw over the weekend was widespread airstrikes, decisive and powerful is how President Trump described them. U.S. National Security Advisor Mike Waltz said the strikes targeted multiple Houthi leaders and took them out. He said, we just hit them with overwhelming force. And this is where you talk about escalation. He said to put Iran on notice that enough is enough, because the thinking is, and the intelligence shows, that the Houthis in Yemen are backed by Iran. They're armed by Iran. They're trained by Iran. They have their more sophisticated weapons. At least the technology is supplied by Iran. So an attack on the Houthis can be seen to escalate if Iran were to step in. However, I have to mention, we've had multiple conversations about this, you and I. Iran's closest and most powerful proxy, Hezbollah, has essentially been decimated. Iran's air defenses are on its knees right now. So when you talk about escalation, you have to think about, well, where is the capability? The Houthis will absolutely, they've already tried to retaliate. They fired, according to them anyway, they fired something like a dozen cruise missiles and ballistic missiles towards U.S. ships. They said that one of them actually hit the USS Harry S. Truman, which is an aircraft carrier. We spoke to U.S. officials, say no. There was one ballistic missile that was sort of in the vicinity, but it crashed into the sea. So the escalation is already there. But in terms of capacity, it's really, it's not a fight at all. The Houthis don't have anywhere near the capability or capacity to square off against even the U.S. presence. And I should also mention, it's not just the United States in that region, but coalition partners.
And Charlie, I want to move for a moment now to Ukraine and Russia. Tomorrow, President Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin are going to speak over the phone, and they're going to talk about potentially ending this war with Ukraine. But there's a lot on the table here. Can you go through the terms here? And what do you think Vladimir Putin really wants out of this?
Well, Vladimir Putin, President Putin sort of made clear a couple of days ago when he talked about we're going to see what the details are. And he sort of mentioned that he would have wanted to go to status quo. And where it becomes critical mass here, or status quo ante, where this becomes critical mass is he will not want to concede any land, any territory, even inside Ukraine, that Russia has taken over. So that's just the starting point right there. And at the moment, Russian forces have been absolutely pummeling Ukrainian forces in the Kursk region. So this is on Russian soil to push Ukrainian forces out. I mean, it's sort of a tempo that we hadn't seen until, a few days ago. So that President Putin is sort of leveraging his power. So I think what tomorrow's conversation is going to be about is concessions. President Trump wants to bring this war to an end as quickly as possible. As he says, he wants the killing to stop. He's already warned the Ukrainians that they're going to have to sacrifice in order to do so. But President Putin, he's really at the controls right now in terms of pushing Ukrainian forces out of the Kursk region and disavowing or dismissing any idea that they'll want to give away territory. And President Trump said as much as that, even in the short time that he addressed that, he said there is territory, Russian-held territory, including power plants. I can imagine that's the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, which is under Russian control. So I think that's the starting point.
It'll be interesting to see what comes out of that conversation. I really want to talk to you tomorrow after that, because you were there when Russia invaded Ukraine with the start of this war. So
I was there.
You were there.
I was there. I was in Zaporizhzhia when the Russians took over Zaporizhzhia in Dnipro. Yep.
You saw it with your own eyes.
We had to talk about it.
All right. Well, look forward to that. Thank you, Charlie. Always great to see you. All right, now to the latest on the search for the American college student who vanished on spring break in the Dominican Republic. Manuel Bajorquez is in Punta Cana with the clues authorities are narrowing in on.
The last person investigators believe Sudiksha Kananki was seen with, 22-year-old Joshua Ribb, told U.S. investigators he is not certain if Kananki got out of the water in the early hours of March 6th after they were both overtaken by a wave. Surveillance video shows Kananke at the Rio Republica Resort's bar before she and a group of people, including Rib, walked toward the beach. At one point, Kananke and Rib walk with their arms around each other. Video shows the others return to the hotel while Kananke and Rib stayed behind. He told police that's when they were swept into the sea by a large wave and struggled against the water. He believed Kananke was out of the ocean, but is not 100% sure. Investigators are looking into all possibilities of what could have happened to the 20-year-old, including an accidental drowning or foul play. This remains a missing person case, not a criminal investigation.
In a statement, Reeb's family says they hope that Kananke is found as soon as possible, adding, quote, "We trust that the investigation will be conducted with transparency and justice." Manuel Bojorquez, CBS News, Punta Cana, Dominican Republic.
Well, the nation's food supply is fueled by immigrants. They are the essential workers who were inspired by the American dream. Coming up in our Eye on America, how deportations could impact how we shop at the grocery store. You're watching CBS News 24/7. To New York now for our Eye on America, with today's story focusing on the role immigrants play in the nation's food supply. We found essential workers on the farm, driving the trucks, stocking grocery shelves, and even bringing new foods to market. CBS's Nikki Batiste reports on an immigrant story inspired by the American dream.
Saffron Road Foods makes sauces, snacks, and frozen entrees sold at grocery stores from Walmart to Whole Foods. Adnan Durrani is Saffron Road's CEO. He started the company in 2010.
What inspired Saffron Road specifically?
So I thought, wouldn't it be neat if we created a food brand that took really the different cultures and ethnicities and diversity of that Silk Road and brought it into really the mainstream America.
Durrani legally immigrated from Pakistan with his diplomat parents when he was a child. After years working on Wall Street, he became more interested in social entrepreneurship and switched to the food industry.
How much of your own journey as an immigrant played into how you're here today?
We wouldn't be here today at Saffron Road if it wasn't for my immigrant journey. A lot of our employees here are from different immigrant communities, and they bring that authenticity and that diversity of culture and that really celebration of the different types of cuisines that they've experienced in their family home and their family meals to come in and help devise those meals.
One of those immigrants is Director of Commercialization for Saffron Road, Lulu Gardner. Gardner immigrated to the U.S. from China, receiving her master's degree in food science from Cornell University in 2014. She was hired on an H-1B visa and has worked for Saffron Road for 10 years. She's now a U.S. citizen.
It's a little bit hard for food science background graduate to find a job in the United States. And for me, I'm very lucky to find a company that was willing to take on, even if they don't understand what is an E-verification, H-1B at the time. We're such a small team, and they're willing to give me a shot.
When people say immigrants are taking jobs from Americans, what's your response?
I don't see how that's factually true at all. It just doesn't make any sense. I think if you look through history even and what's happened in this country, and there's been studies on going back over 100 years, how immigration has consistently fueled the industry.
If the number of immigrants goes down, how does that impact the price of your product?
It impacts it dramatically. You're going to see trucking go up, and as a result, it will result in a lot more inflation of simple, staple products like milk and eggs and bread and so on.
Nikki Batiste, CBS News, Port Washington, New York.
Right now, White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt is giving a briefing. Our newsroom correspondent Chanel Call is listening to all of it. Chanel, what's been happening so far?
All right, so we know, Liz, the press briefing comes after the Trump administration just deported throngs of Venezuelans this past weekend. We had video that we shared with our viewers to show those 3 plane loads of people. The Trump administration accused them of being violent gang members. They were sent from the U.S. to that notorious prison in El Salvador. Now, this happened even though a federal judge on Saturday had ordered the removals to be temporarily blocked. But today, the White House says the president can do this, citing, as we know, the Alien Enemies Act. This, by the way, has only ever actually been invoked during war. So here's the White House Press Secretary Carolyn Leavitt responding to questions from our Ed O'Keefe about those deportations this weekend.
To follow up on that, then, so you're saying definitively that the administration can prove everyone that was put on those flights to El Salvador was either a member of Trinidad Agua, MS-13, or some other entity?
We've already provided the breakdown in the effort of transparency about the 261 illegal aliens who were deported. 137 of those were deported under the Alien Enemies Act. 101 of those were Venezuelans removed via Title VIII, which, as you know, are just regular immigration proceedings. And 23 of them were MS-13 Salvadorian gang members. There were also 2 MS-13 ringleaders as part of that group of 23 who President Bukele particularly expressed his gratitude for their return so he can demand justice in his home country. Jennifer.
What criteria, though, other than, say, tattoos or maybe being in the wrong place at the wrong time, are they using to determine that someone is actually a member of one of these organizations?
Intelligence and the men and women on the ground in the interior of our country who are finally being allowed to do their jobs. Their hands were tied under the previous administration, and as I said, they take their jobs very seriously. They should be trusted and respected by the American public with this operation. And of course, as I said to Kelly, the administration will provide all details to the questions that the court poses. Jennifer.
One more follow-up on that. Can you say how much the U.S. is paying El Salvador to imprison these Venezuelans? And then a different question on Russia. I was wondering if you could give us an update on the ceasefire negotiations, and is there anything you can share on the list that Putin passed along to President Trump for the things he's requested?
Sure. To your first question, it was approximately $6 million to El Salvador for the detention of these foreign terrorists. And I would point out that is pennies on the dollar in comparison to the cost of life and the cost it would impose on the American taxpayer to house these terrorists in maximum security prisons here in the United States of America. And I would echo the message of our Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, who expressed his gratitude to President Bukele and El Salvador's government for their cooperation in this deal. As for Russia, as you know, the president announced last night on Air Force One on his return from his very busy weekend in Florida that he will be speaking to President Putin tomorrow. I won't get ahead of those negotiations, but I can say we are on the 10th yard line of peace, and we've never been closer to a peace deal than we are in this moment. And the president, as you know, is determined to get one done. Sure.
I have 2 questions.
All right, so Liz, important to mention here, the Trump administration says those flights were already up in the air when the written court document was issued. So the Trump administration is basically arguing because the flights were already in the air and over international waters, this is an issue of jurisdiction. This will be challenged later today in the courts. And we heard there from the White House press secretary basically saying the Trump administration is prepared to defend this decision to deport those Venezuelans this weekend in court today.
All right, newsroom correspondent Chanel Call, thank you so much for that update. All right, coming up, get your brackets ready. March Madness is finally here. Matt Lively from CBS News Bay Area joins us right after the break to break down the matchups and the potential upsets. You're watching CBS News 24/7. All right, let the madness begin. College basketball wrapped up conference play over the weekend, setting the final teams for the tournament. Your number 1 seeds for the men, Auburn, Duke, Florida, and Houston. And for the women, UCLA, South Carolina, USC, Fight On, and Texas. CBS News Bay Area's Matt Lively has more on what you need to know before filling out your bracket.
Happy March Madness Monday to you. The tournament officially getting underway on Wednesday. That's when the play-in games are. Thursday is when the round of 64 begins. That's when you need your selections in. The bracket was unveiled yesterday. Let's bring in Bracket Mountain. It's a whole new way to imagine March This is what it looks like. This is our chalk bracket. That means it's all the favorites. The Auburn Tigers at the very top because they are the overall 1 seed. But if we bring them down and just take a general look at the Final Four in the 4 top 1 seeds, you've got Duke, Florida, Houston, and Auburn. That's 2 SEC schools, an ACC powerhouse, and then a Big 12 program that has had residency in this tournament over the last few years. Duke is actually the betting favorite in this tournament, according to Las Vegas. But something to keep an eye on. Cooper Flagg, their best player, sprained his ankle in the ACC tournament. John Shire said that he should be ready to go for March Madness, but he will be likely the overall pick in the NBA draft. So if he's not ready to go, certainly something to keep an eye on. But after all, this is March. Cinderellas, this is where they are made. And so I want to bring up the first round only. We're going to go to the South region here, and I want to show you one of the most popular picks that experts have pointed out for a potential upset. It is 12 seed UC San Diego over number 5 Michigan. If they win, hypothetically, that's what it would look like as they advance past Michigan. Here's the deal with the Tritons. First year ever that they are eligible for the March Madness tournament. They were a D2 school just years ago, but they have 30 wins this year. They win their conference. They'll take on Michigan. The Wolverines won the Big Ten championship, but that means that they just had to play 3 games in 3 days. That's never really a good thing when you're entering a tournament like March Madness. So the Tritons certainly have a shot. They are just 12 points off in net ranking. And oh, by the way, UC San Diego has the nation's longest winning streak at 15 games. But they are not the only Cinderella that we have pointed out. I'm going to load up a full bracket here of just Cinderellas. We'll turn our win-loss effects on so you can see how they get there. Here are a couple other schools that I want to talk about. VCU, an 11 seed. They have been great in this tournament year in and year out. It is their 14th time here since 2021, a school to keep an eye out for. How about Drake, another 11 seed? Drake's been great. They're one of the top teams in the country. They play Mizzou in the first round, and over 35% of CBS users are actually picking Drake to advance in that first round past Mizzou. Another school to keep an eye out, the McNeese Cowboys, as we spin around on the hypothetical Final Four of Cinderella teams. Drake is coached by Will Wade. He's going to take a Power 5 job at the end of the season here. So those are just a few schools, UC San Diego, Drake, McNeese, and VCU to keep an eye out on. As we know, it is March. There is madness. There is no truly predicting what might happen, but you've got the chalk. You've got the Cinderellas. Hopefully that can help you in building a bracket. And as the weeks go on, we'll see what Bracket Mountain will look like.
Such a fun time of year. Thanks, Matt. Well, the Vatican giving us our first look at Pope Francis since his fight against double pneumonia began in a Roman hospital. This photograph to our monitor shows the Pope observing Mass in a hospital chapel. The Pope was hospitalized February 14th. Doctors this week said the pontiff is no longer in critical condition, but his condition remains complex. And a harrowing journey turned triumphant for a Peruvian fisherman. Get this, he spent 95 days lost in the Pacific Ocean. So how did he survive? Well, he ate roaches, birds, and sea turtles. Whoa. Fisherman Maximo Napa is back with his family. He left for a fishing trip back on December 7th. He packed enough food for 2 weeks, but stormy weather hit about 10 days in. It blew his boat off course, and then he ended up adrift in the Pacific Ocean. He said he stayed strong by thinking about his family, including his 2-month-old granddaughter. And as the popular Irish saying goes, may the road rise to meet you. It's St. Patrick's Day. EarthCam showing us revelers in Dublin, Ireland, celebrating the holiday, which started all the way back in the 7th century. Since then, celebrations have spread across the globe. We'll keep an eye on that for you throughout the day. Lots of fun in New York City, too. We'll have much more ahead right here on CBS News 24/7, including a hearing in a legal battle over deportations after President Trump invoked an 18th century wartime act. Plus, these astronauts have spent 9 months in zero gravity with questions hanging over their return to Earth. Now, they're finally getting ready to come back home. Stay with us right here on CBS News 24/7.